All right, everyone. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. I just want to thank everyone for joining today. We have quite a large class, and I'm sure you're all excited about hearing about multi-channel inventory management with eCC Desktop. And today is March 6th. So a bit of housekeeping before we get started. If this is your first time to this webinar, welcome. And I do see some familiar faces, so thank you all the familiar folks for joining today. So today's webinar is going to last for about an hour. And everyone is muted, and I'll be taking questions during the particular areas I'll be talking about, and then I'll open it up to some general questions during the question and answer forum. And if you do have any questions within your GoToMeeting dashboard, if you see that orange arrow, you can open up your GoToMeeting dashboard, and there is a questions area. You can put all your questions there. So I will be taking questions. So don't be shy. Feel free to ask me at any time. So your presenter today is myself, and I am the Customer Success Manager here at Webgility. So a little bit about who we are. So I'm sure you all know about all of our products, eCC Desktop, eCC Cloud, and ShipLark, but I want to talk to you about the company. So we're headquartered here in San Francisco, and we have our development and support centers in Indore, India. Our products currently serve thousands of small to medium-sized businesses worldwide, and we've been a certified Intuit developer since 2007. We're also partnered with top e-commerce platforms such as BigCommerce and Magento, shipping providers such as FedEx and UPS, and hosted QuickBooks providers such as Right Networks. And we have hundreds of web designers, developers, QuickBooks Pro advisors, all promoting our products. And you, of course, know what our products are: eCC Desktop, eCC Cloud, and ShipLark. So for today's presentation, I'm primarily going to talk about eCC Desktop. So a little bit about this agenda. I'm going to focus on e-commerce inventory management and go into some steps that are really key to managing your inventory. So talking about where is your inventory, what is e-commerce channel management, the complexities and the behaviors of inventory. And then I'll go into some processes about, and this is the beginning foundation of managing inventory, these particular steps. And then I'm going to go into automation with the eCC scheduler. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about a technique, a term, or a function that I coined for this process. All right, so e-commerce inventory management. What is it? So step one to managing your e-commerce inventory is knowing where your inventory is. If you have no idea where your inventory is, you cannot begin to manage it. So the first question is, who maintains your inventory? Is it you? Is it somebody in your in a different department? Is it someone who is doing the shipping? Who is maintaining your inventory? Next question, what is your master inventory location? When you get in new inventory, where are you putting that inventory? Where are you receiving that inventory? And again, who is doing this? And the next question is, when do you update your inventory? Do you update your inventory daily? Is it weekly? Is it real time? Is your expectation real time? So when do you update your inventory is a very important question and a factor that you should always take into account. Next, where is your inventory right now? So knowing exactly where your inventory is it physically in your store? Is it physically with your drop shipper? Is it in transit? Knowing exactly where your inventory is at each point is key to managing inventory within an e-commerce environment. Next question, how are you currently maintaining your correct inventory levels? So when you receive new inventory, where are you putting that? If you have to adjust your inventory, where are you doing that? You should be doing that within your master location. That's why it's important to establish a master location for your inventory. And why is all this important? Well, we're talking about e-commerce management within a multi-channel environment. So this is important because how many online stores do you have? Because you're going to have to think about all of these factors for each online store or each channel that you have. So understanding this entire process in relation to each facet of your business is extremely important and is absolutely essential to e-commerce inventory management. So what is multi-channel e-commerce? What do I mean by multi-channel e-commerce? I mean by the online stores. So the first step to understanding e-commerce or multi-channel e-commerce management within the product is that everything is balanced by QuickBooks. You could be using QuickBooks Financials in multiple stores and QuickBooks Point of Sale with multiple online stores. Let's not forget that within QuickBooks Point of Sale, you are dealing with a brick and mortar store. So if you have Point of Sale and even one online shopping cart, that's multi-channel because your point of sale environment and your brick and mortar is always going to be competing with your shopping cart. You are now a multi-channel seller. So we've got QuickBooks, and then we've got our multi-channel. So I've got my Amazon store, my eBay store, and I've got my website. So usually we structure multi-channel within kind of a 3-store environment. I know I just said if you've got point of sale, that could be a 1 or a 2-store online store environment. So these are some examples of what would be considered multi-channel. And then of course eCC sits in the middle of both areas. So you've got eCC sitting in the middle, you've got QuickBooks at one end, you've got one or more shopping carts on the other end, and data is flowing from QuickBooks through eCC into the online shopping carts. So it is this communication and this information that is flowing from the centralized point of QuickBooks through eCC into the online shopping carts. So what I want to reiterate is the establishing of a master inventory location. And if you're using within multi-channel management, you need to have a pivot point. And that pivot point is going to be eCC, but you also need to have a foundation. And that foundation is going to be your master location for your inventory. And it's in my best practice that it's best done within QuickBooks. Because if you're using financials, that is the area that you can always depend on that is going to have the correct inventory. That is where you should be receiving your inventory. If you have established that an online, one of your shopping carts is the master location, that could get a little bit confusing, especially within this multi-channel situation, because then QuickBooks is not the master location. Then you have to really think about, well, where is my data flowing? And all of this will become extremely apparent when we go into the scheduler and I talk about this technique of managing inventory with eCC and using the automation. So it is very important to establish the master location for your inventory. So now I want to talk about some complexities. I already talked about establishing the master location for your inventory. Now let's talk about database size. Database size, so this is the number of items and the number of items in your store. So let's say you've got 10, let's do a little bit more of that. Let's say if you got 100 items in your QuickBooks point of sale or your QuickBooks financials, and then you have 100, those 100 items are now duplicated in all of your online stores. Let's say you have a shopping cart and you've duplicated that into 2 marketplaces. You essentially have 300 products. So to kind of calculate the size of your database and the amount of data that's kind of flowing through eCC, you should definitely multiply however many products that you have. You should definitely multiply those at least by 3. And that will tell you your database. Knowing the size of your database will help build the expectation in a correct way. Your database size will also affect the frequency of automated tasks that the scheduler can do quickly. It will also affect the quantity synchronization. Now all of this kind of cascades into real-time versus realistic time. Now, I know real-time in a perfect world, if you had 200,000 products, in a perfect world, real-time would be as soon as someone orders one of those 200,000 products, in an instant, everything would be updated. Let's be realistic. if your database is extremely large, real time is as real as rapid as eCC can be trying to synchronize this. So it's not going to be a matter of minutes. It could possibly be a matter of hours. So knowing the size of your database helps to really understand what is realistic time. Because within the time, e-commerce is extremely quick, as we all know. You know, quantities can change, the amounts can change at an instant. And I know that the main concern of multi-channel inventory management, the goal is to not oversell. So overselling is selling more than what you have and then having to make the decision of, okay, who's going to get the product, who's going to get the refund, how bad is this going to hurt? So you never want to be in that situation within an e-commerce environment. You never want to find yourself in that situation where you have to make that decision with 10 clients or 10 customers, because then we start to see a breakdown of your business. We start to see, like if you're working on Amazon and you have to do all these things, you can start to see a decrease in your ratings. So all of this can cascade into larger business issues. So you really want to make sure that you're managing your inventory so you're not overselling. You know and can expect the realistic time. You've built your business around the realistic time of quantity synchronization. So that is that's kind of the inventory complexities and that I wanted to talk about. And I see I do have a question here. Okay, I've got a question. Thank you for your questions. Always feel free to ask any questions anytime. Okay, so I've got a question here. How do you selectively sync to multiple stores? Some items have two sites, but all other products to the third, for example. Okay, that's a really good question. So this question is really about, you know, what if I have to selectively sync? So what if I have 3 stores and 2 of my stores need this synchronization, but one of my store doesn't need it? When you're synchronizing inventory, you have to synchronize all of your inventory. When you kind of pick and choose which ones, you really have to be engaged as to what you want eCC to ignore and what you want it to take into account. So when I go into the demo, into the actual product, I do want to address that and kind of talk about ignoring products, how to do that, kind of how to take products that you want eCC to ignore out of the scheduler automated database so you can at least have more time, and that can kind of give you a little bit more time. So I definitely will address that. Thank you for that question. So we're talking about inventory complexities. So let's also talk about item behaviors. And the reason why I call them behaviors is because when you understand how an item behaves, you can begin to break down how you can break down how you handle that item. So you know items have attributes, colors, and sizes. And within a point of sale context, when you have one product, you have the physical product. So you have physically a red one, a blue one, a green one. And you can at least have sizes with those. So and this is where we talk about these attributes exponentially create additional products, especially within a point of sale context because they're physical goods. Same with financials, but you don't have that aspect of physical good, I need to have this on the shelf. It's kind of like a virtual exponential growth of products where point of sale is more physical. Then you have options. So certain shopping carts kind of throw around these, the terminology of variations and options. That's why I really want to focus on behavior, because the nomenclature of these words can change depending on the type of cart you have, but the behavior of the product will always be the same. So knowing the behavior, again, allows you to know how to handle that product. and how that product is best structured. So we have our options, our small, medium, and larges, and X larges, for example. We've got variants, and so this is kind of an expansion of this option type behavior. You know, a variant product has attributes for each option, and each option has a unique identifier, just like we've got these two t-shirts here. Has this shirt is a simple product into itself. The next thing we have is the base product. The base product is what you see. It's the cosmetic product. When a customer goes to purchase a product, they're really purchasing the option or the variant. The base product is just for show. And a child item. A child item, especially within the QuickBooks Financials context, it's a combination of option values that are always tied to the parent item. So the child item is always known in relation to the parent or the child item or sub item, if I'm going to talk about QuickBooks terminology, is always associated to its parent item and is always known in conjunction with the parent item. So as you can see, there's a lot of vocabulary here, but the key is understanding the behavior. That will kind of take a lot of the, it'll seem less overwhelming if you really take into account the behavior rather than the actual terminology. So now that we know how all of our products behave, we know how kind of where our inventory is. Now, step 2, and this is kind of going into eCC now. Step 2 is establishing matching criteria in eCC. This little image here is showing the product screen within the store configuration. And the product screen is one of the most important screens within the store configuration because it holds the information of how eCC recognizes a product in the online shopping cart and its corresponding twin in QuickBooks. So in my last webinar, when I talked just about inventory, I mentioned the name of the game is matching. You always want your products to match. If you have 5,000 products in your online store and 5,000 products in your QuickBooks, you want to see 5,000 matching products. If you're looking at that, if that's the way your products look in eCC, you're in a really good spot. You have just attained the first level of foundation to managing your e-commerce, and it is this matching criteria. So when I talk about matching criteria, what I'm referring to is how eCC identifies products in the online store. So it could be by SKU, product ID, model number, product name. I know, kind of talking with a lot of users, people are using SKUs, and that's great. SKUs are an alphanumeric field, and the SKU is really what you're going to be using in your online store. Now in QuickBooks, so in QuickBooks Financials, you've got an item name and number field. Again, that's an alphanumeric field, so your SKU that you have in your online store in QuickBooks Financials can be your item name and number within QuickBooks. That's a really good way of organizing your products and structuring your products within QuickBooks. Now in point of sale, we've got a lot more options here because the item number is the order in which the item was created in QuickBooks. The item name could be how that item, how you know that item is in the online store, like if somebody's looking for that item. So I'm looking for a pair of jeans, and I put in the name of the brand of jeans. That is how my employees know that product. So using another field such as a UPC or an ALU or even the SKU field within point of sale, if you are not using kind of the ALU or the UPC field, you can totally use those fields to hold in the SKU that you have in the online store. So at point of sale, you've got a little bit more options there. But again, establishing what that matching criteria is, establishing how eCC should recognize a product in the shopping cart and its corresponding twin in QuickBooks, that is the goal. So that's really, really important because, especially within multi-channel management, because you're going to be using the matching criteria to establish a basis of how eCC should recognize your products in both places. But then we have kind of another area to look at. Now, matching, here's step 3. We're going to be using a technique called matching and mapping. Now, mapping is essentially correcting a problem, and a problem that I see a lot of the times is when your online store SKU does not match your QuickBooks SKU, or vice versa, and you have to force eCC to recognize that this product expressed in 2 different ways is the same thing. So in this context of multi-channel management, mapping is not a bad thing. It's something that will enhance and add to the matching criteria that you have when an interface such as a marketplace doesn't allow you the freedom of creating your own SKU, or the SKU that is in your other channels that you've established that matches. So let me illuminate this concept for you here. So in QuickBooks, my SKU is SKU123. In my shopping cart, it's SKU123. And in my marketplace, eBay, because I'm using the custom SKU field, it's also SKU123. And together, but in Amazon, I don't have the control over naming my SKU. This, if you're a bookseller, this is a ISBN number for a book, 978, and then followed by 10 numbers. So that ISBN number is established by the publishing company, which is established by Amazon. Amazon says this is the SKU for this product. That's why if you're looking for a book, you can put in the ISBN into Amazon and find the exact book. So, and the ISBN is a standardized designation, numerical designation for a particular product. So if you've already established, what the SKU is for this particular product in Amazon, and you've already made your own custom SKU on your shopping cart in QuickBooks, it's not going to match. But that's okay. So I'm going to show you how this is done. So first, let's take into account everything that matches. Great. So this particular book I have expressed in QuickBooks as SKU123, matches with my shopping cart. If I have the same book in eBay, it totally matches. We got a match. That's great. But what if my other multi-channel component is Amazon? Amazon doesn't allow me to use my own SKU. It governs the SKU. Amazon makes the rules. What can I do? I can map that. So within eCC, this Amazon SKU falls out of the matching criteria. But by using the mapping, I can tell eCC that this designation in QuickBooks means exactly this product in Amazon. So when you see this product in Amazon, when you see this product in an order, it is the same product. So this is the technique of using matching and mapping within the multi-channel e-commerce realm. So, and this is another key of the foundation of inventory management with eCC. So I know this is a lot. I definitely encourage you to take notes, and this webinar is going to be recorded, so if you need to go back and kind of listen and use this as a basis of how you're understanding your business, I think that would be very, very important. So now that we know where our master location for our inventory is, we know where our inventory is, and now we have utilized the functionality of matching and mapping together in conjunction. Now we can talk about automation. And we can automate functions like this and synchronize inventory between QuickBooks and all of the online channels using the scheduler. So step 4, using the scheduler. What is the scheduler? Many of you are probably using the scheduler right now. So all this is probably not new. But again, I am going to talk about the scheduler and really kind of reiterate what the scheduler is within this context of multi-channel e-commerce management. So, as you know, it runs separately from eCC Desktop. It automatically pulls in the orders from the online store. And that's really important. So an online shopping cart, just by the construction of the online shopping cart, is going to automatically decrease the quantity within its interface. That's fine. Shopping cart handles that, the initial point. And when eCC downloads that order, that inventory is held within the actual order. Now, QuickBooks has no idea that that inventory has just changed. How does QuickBooks know the inventory has changed? eCC posts that order to QuickBooks. QuickBooks then deducts the inventory, and the inventory within that order is now balanced. So the quantity in the online store now matches the quantity in QuickBooks. This is just with kind of one order. This is a kind of an easy scenario here. And then, so let's turn this situation around to point of sale. Let's say in QuickBooks I'm running QuickBooks point of sale. Someone buys a pair of jeans and makes a sales receipt in QuickBooks. eCC has that information and knows that, okay, there's a change in inventory. So, but see, the online shopping cart has no idea that someone has just bought those pair of jeans in the online store. What needs to happen? eCC has to then update the online store, or stores in this context. So if you can imagine 3 stores within the mystore.com. Ooh, I have another question. All right, so someone else has asked, does mapping allow you to set up a different quantity for the SKU in an online store versus QuickBooks? That is a very, very good question. No. And the reason why I say no is because one of the most essential points of inventory management is making sure inventory is the same in every single place. If you've got 10 in QuickBooks, you should have 10 in your online stores, or 10 in your different channels. When you're working with different inventories, like let's say your store has 10 and my QuickBooks has 5, you have now lost control. Inventory, one of the key points of inventory management is control. If your inventory, if you cannot say you've got one location where you know exactly where the inventory is correct, you do not have control of your inventory. Therefore, you will run into errors. You will oversell. So mapping does not allow you to set up a different quantity. The kind of game in this is equalization of quantity. So that's a very good question, Mo. Thank you. So kind of back to the scheduler here. Oh, another one. How can I set up some items that I may have 0 inventory for, but I can drop ship directly from my manufacturer? Very good question. So when you're working with drop shippers, and I definitely am going to talk about drop shipping more within another webinar, because drop shipping involves an entire business process. There are different kind of components in drop shipping. One of the components in drop shipping is how you, the merchant, are communicating with your drop shipper. The next component is how are those products structured within your QuickBooks. If you don't hold the inventory, or if inventory is not even a factor, then you should be structuring those inventory products in QuickBooks as non-inventory items. But then again, how do you as a merchant know really how many do you have? How is your drop shipper communicating with you? So drop shipping really is another piece of complexity within the inventory management, because a drop shipper takes into account your inventory, but you're not accounting for that inventory actively. Your drop shipper is fulfilling those orders by shipping them out, but then you have to know, well, how many do I have now? When do I need to replenish the inventory? Is my drop shipper going to run out? So drop shipping is it's a complex piece of kind of a complex business functionality that eCC can definitely kind of make a little bit easier, such as like if you're creating purchase orders and things and that's how you communicate, eCC can make that process go easier. But the relationship between you as the merchant and the drop shipper, you really have to have that under control. So I hope that kind of got to the root of your question, Kristen. If not, you can always ask me a follow-up when I can see what I can do. Another question. If a SKU is sold as a pair in one store and another store it's sold as a single item, how can inventory be synced for each store? It's a very good question and a very big problem. If you've got a pair in one store, so I've got two, and I've got a single item in another, I've got 2 to 1. So the pair in one store is going to sell out considerably quicker than all it is in all the other ones in the other stores. So we've got 2 to 1. So this is really about quantity. And if you have a situation like this, inventory and quantity synchronization is really important. Because if you're selling out in one store double the amount you have in another store, you're going to oversell real quick. So maybe reducing the amount of inventory you have in one area that allows you to retain that control. Now, in terms of syncing correctly, again, we're dealing with 2 different levels of quantity. Your master location has to have the total quantity. If one store has over the amount that you truly have, you're going to oversell. So that's going to be a problem. So again, equalization of quantity and kind of knowing kind of where you're going to sell out more. So let's say you have a channel that is going to sell out more rapidly than your website. Let's say Amazon is a quicker interface. You get a lot more orders on Amazon than you do in your own web store. So you're really going to have to be engaged with that marketplace and really manage that inventory heavily within the area that's pulling your sales out at a greater rate than something that is kind of a little bit slower that can just kind of be a reflection of the speed. So again, it's all about inventory quantity equalization. Thank you for those questions. Very good questions. So kind of, another one here. Can you feed your website inventory from 2 brick-and-mortar locations? Okay. Now we're getting into more complex type of questions. I really like these. So 2 brick-and-mortar locations. The first thing to take into account when you have 2 brick-and-mortar locations is how are your 2 brick-and-mortar locations communicating? How does one store know what the other store is sold? Do you have a centralized location that combines both locations of inventory? If not, eCC is just going to be as blind as you are in the situation if you have no idea how you're communicating. So, finding a centralized pivot point is really, really important. So if you've got 2 brick-and-mortar stores, what location holds the master database? If one of the stores is established as the master database, so store A is going to be the master database. It's also going to be my flagship store. Store B is going to have a connection to store A by way of network. eCC is not involved in that. So if something is sold in store B, then store A immediately knows about it. If something is sold in store A, store B knows about it because its inventory, its database is a reflection of store A. That must be taken care of. That has to always be taken into account because you want eCC to connect to store A's database. So store A's database is the master location, and therefore when you have inventory fluctuations within your online shopping carts, that data will be put into the master location for store A, and then store B can be a reflection, as will all the other online shopping carts. So we've got some that is an extreme complex type of management, which will kind of really, that's going to be difficult. I don't want to say difficult, that's going to be a challenge because it's really establishing, okay, where is the pivot point of the master location, because that's extremely important. So thank you for that question. I have another question. If I'm out of stock of inventory, does eCC notify me or will it sync with QuickBooks? if QuickBooks is your master location, you should always be engaged in QuickBooks. You should always know when you're running low. Some shopping carts will give you a little alert, but that's within the shopping cart. So constantly being engaged and knowing where your inventory dips. I know in QuickBooks you're able to set a threshold. I know in some shopping carts you're able to set a threshold. So for example, if a quantity is 5, dips below 5 in QuickBooks, then the online shopping carts will reflect 0. So that's something that you need to look into your shopping cart if it gives you that option. And you should definitely kind of investigate that within QuickBooks. So if it dips below a certain level, what to do. So great question. Thank you. Another question. If an order is changed in eCC, such as adding or removing a product, can eCC update the order in Magento with the correct products, or should the order be edited in Magento? Very, very good question. Now, that's a completely different kind of thing. And it's kind of a rule of thumb, if you have to adjust something or a detail in the online shopping cart or in the order, it's best done in the online shopping cart. Reason being, because there is a function, and I know the Magento store can do this. eCC is able to detect fluctuations in information. So if you have to adjust the quantity of an item, or which will ultimately adjust the order total, or if you have to change any piece of the information, eCC is able to look at those, and then you can re-download the newest data. So I'm going to show you that when I go into the product. Cool. Great questions. Thank you. Keep them coming. So really, when you're doing when you're using the scheduler to kind of synchronize this inventory and all of these kind of complex situations in these questions that I got, it's really about using the scheduler and utilizing the scheduler to your advantage. So now I'm actually going to go into the product, and I'm going to go into this process that I like to call chain of automation. And this chain of automation using the scheduler involves setting the scheduler to automate at specific and calculated time intervals. So you can have a better kind of control over how data is being synchronized, at what frequency is it being synchronized, and build the right expectation of realistic time of data being equalized. Okay? So now I'm going to go into the product, and I'm going to show you the scheduler. So here's the product, and here's the scheduler. Scheduler runs independently from the eCC software, so it can really be independent. And depending on how many stores you have, I'm going to show you my complex multi-channel management. Here are all my stores. Each one of these stores are different, and each one of these stores has a different interface into itself in terms of online shopping cart. And every single one of these stores are feeding directly into one company file. So again, a rule of thumb, when you're working with multi-channel management, it is absolutely essential that you're using one company file. If you have to swap between another company file, it's going to break down this entire process. You're just going to confuse the scheduler, it's going to shut down, and it's just going to not work. And it's going to kind of cascade into issues of inventory management within e-commerce. So use one centralized QuickBooks company file always. So because I can set the scheduler for each one of my stores individually, so this is a BigCommerce store, this is my Amazon store right here, so I can have different settings for each of these individual stores. And if you need a little bit more in-depth about this scheduler, I did do a webinar a couple weeks ago about the scheduler. So I don't want to go into what each of these tabs are. I really want to focus on how to construct this chain of automation. So the first step into constructing chain of automation is to decide on what's the size of your database? So If my database is, 50,000 products, okay, chain of automation is extremely important because I want a nice solid interval of automating these functions. So the first step into automating these functions is deciding what's the frequency eCC should download orders. So if I'm downloading orders every 30 minutes, well, actually, let's make it a little quicker than that. Let's say I'm downloading orders every 5 minutes, or even every 1 minute. Let's take into account 5 minutes. Okay. So we know that the online shopping cart is going to decrease the quantity on its own. eCC is going to download those orders into its interface. Now, QuickBooks has no idea that that quantity has just fluctuated until the order is posted to QuickBooks. I will talk about when eCC does know about that when I go into the synchronization of products, but it's all about when QuickBooks is going to know. So if I'm going to download orders every 5 minutes, how about I post to QuickBooks every 15? So that's 3 cycles of 5. I know that when I look at the clock, 15 minutes from now, eCC is going to do three captures of orders that it's going to download. So this is kind of the first piece in the chain of automation. So when is eCC going to download orders? When is eCC going to post the orders to QuickBooks? Now, if you have a large database, instead of automating posting to store, you may want to leave that out. You really want to let the scheduler automate the most essential functions. So a function posting to store has nothing to do with inventory. You may want to leave the scheduler out so it can focus on automating and equalizing your inventory. So back to the automation. So for my Amazon store, downloading orders every 5 minutes, posting orders to QuickBooks every 15, 3 cycles of 5. Awesome. Now let's go to the Products tab. When I enable the scheduler, I'm going to set it for the quickest time we've got. So 30 minutes. This is the quickest time with Amazon. So if I'm downloading orders every 5, posting the orders every 15, it's going to sync in 2 cycles of posting to QuickBooks. This is the beginning of the chain of automation. As you can see, the chain of automation is an equalized timing structure. So you can easily look at a clock and kind of know what's going on. This is all about control. Now, the second area, select an option to synchronize the data. All right, this is all about master location for your inventory. If your master location is your QuickBooks, which is what it should be within a multi-channel e-commerce situation, what are you going to do? Update the online store product. Never go in the other direction. Because if you've got one company file to, let's say, 3 online interfaces, if you were to switch it, QuickBooks would have the wrong inventory, and you would have to recount your inventory, and no one wants to have to do that. You should only be doing that twice a year, and that's kind of a rule of thumb. So you always want to make sure you have regular inventory counts and put the correct inventory within your master location. So that's why establishing a master location is key, because you're updating your online stores according to the values within your master location. Now, select the data you want to sync. If let's say you're running sales regularly and you want it to synchronize price and quantity, you can do that. But if you have a rather large database, you may have to kind of pull back on the synchronization of price, just so the synchronization of quantity can be as realistic time as possible. So this is really kind of a combination of understanding how far you can push the software to kind of what you're doing in your business. Because again, managing inventory is all about control. So now that we've structured our chain of automation, I know that every 30 minutes, eCC is going to now sync up the quantity that I have in my QuickBooks because it's already posted some orders to QuickBooks. It did it twice because that's my 2 cycles of 15. And it's going to update all of that information. I have a question. Can you have different prices in different stores for the same item and not cause a problem? Yes, but just don't sync the price. So if you've got different prices, that's okay. eCC is going to grab whatever pricing is in that order, but you don't want to sync that price because then all of your prices are going to come up incorrectly. So just sync quantity if you've got different pricing. That's a great question. Thank you. So this is the chain of automation. Now, there's one other really, really important aspect into the chain of automation, and it's how frequently does eCC look at the new data that's in QuickBooks? Because that's really where eCC needs to be looking constantly. It's going to look when it's syncing, of course, but you always want to have the most recent information and know eCC is kind of gathering that information within this chain of automation. It's kind of a secondary but very, very important piece within the chain of automation. So I'm going to always want to download items since I'm really engaged in the quantity aspect. I want to always download item data. And let's say within the chain of automation, I do it every hour. So I know every hour eCC is going to look for information. I know every 30 minutes, so 2 cycles within an hour, eCC is going to be synchronizing. I know within that synchronizing cycle, I'm going to have some posting to QuickBooks. So 4 pieces within the hour, it's going to post to QuickBooks. And then within that, I'm going to be able to download orders every 5 minutes. So you see how this chain of automation is building exponentially, but at an equal interval. So this is also a really good thing to note as well. Another question, if we have, we create coupon codes in eCC, can eCC automatically create those in QuickBooks? It really depends on how your online shopping cart treats the discount code. So I'm going to take a little bit, so you kind of have one of 2 options. You can have a discount code that manifests itself as an individual product within the order, and the code would be the product SKU. Or you have another scenario where it takes in that discounted amount and puts it into the discount field, deducting from the total. So it really depends on what that functionality is. Now, if you have this particular shopping cart that creates its own unique item for this discount code, eCC can create that, but how many discount codes do you have? Do you have a lot of them floating around? This is all about kind of structuring your discount codes. Now, if I have a discount code and it's kind of in, it's in the order, and I decide to, and it's missing, this is one piece of the automation here that you can do. It would technically be a missing product, and you can then create that missing product within the Orders tab in the scheduler. You have an option to create missing product in QuickBooks, and you can do this completely separately. You can, since creating products is just one more piece or one more thing that the scheduler has to do, you may want to handle creating these products kind of as they come. So maybe you can kind of keep this separate from the chain of automation and say I want to do this every 3 hours if eCC detects any missing products. Really, all of these, any type of automated structure or automated task that you throw into the scheduler is going to decrease its speed depending on the how large your database is. So this is why knowing your database will help you understand, okay, what can I do in a realistic time? What are the most essential pieces of automation that I need to have in order for this process of synchronizing inventory to be as quick as possible? So with that said, and kind of these webinar series are, this is definitely, a training webinar, and I love doing this. But let's say, you just purchase eCC and you're going to need a little bit of help, getting this set up, kind of directing you in the right way to get everything structured. We have our friendly customer success squad that is here to help you set these things up, help you get your scheduler together, and talk to you about this process. If you haven't purchased, implementation services, or it didn't come with your particular eCC plan, you can always purchase those. And if you have any questions, you can always email us at success@webgility.com. We also have educational resources. So in addition to these webinars, we also have our help desk, which holds the product documentation. And I want to go to this area a bit and actually show you that within this chain of automation, I actually wrote an article about this. So here's our help desk, and it's help.webgility.com. So let's say you want to search for this kind of chain of automation article that I created. Just type in the word oversell or overselling and go ahead and search, and it'll bring up this article, How to Prevent Overselling When Integrating with Multiple Stores. So this pretty much kind of illuminates the chain of automation step by step. So you can use this as a really good reference to kind of understand this chain of automation, building automation within a equalized set of intervallic time, and kind of this will give you a guide as to kind of some of the intricacies of doing this within the scheduler. So I'll let you read that at your leisure, and you can of course watch this webinar at any time. Another thing I wanted to mention in terms of resources, just one second, I think I have a question. Oh, no new questions. Okay, so kind of another resources in terms of education for you is our blog. We're going to be doing a lot more information and putting a lot more information in our blog. So you definitely want to be engaged there. You may learn something you didn't know, or you may enhance something you already do know. Another resource that you have is a friendly support team. Here's the number right there, extension 3, Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 6. If you have any questions, 8 a.m. to 6 Pacific time. If you have any questions, you can always email them or create a support ticket at support@webgility.com. So, I know this was a really, really tough topic, and there's going to be more webinars like this coming up for the month of March. The month of March is making the most out of eCC. So this is kind of how we've structured our webinars. Today, of course, multi-channel inventory management. Next week, we're going to talk about getting your QuickBooks ready for taxes, and we are going to have our resident QuickBooks advisor who does most of our consultations, Mark Chapman. And he will be presenting with me on this webinar to talk about how to get your QuickBooks ready for taxes. And then the week after that, we're going to do more tax talk. And we're going to talk about Avalara and AvaTax with eCC Desktop. And then the final webinar within this series are my personal top 5, maybe 10 tips and tricks for utilizing eCC Desktop. And all of our webinars are on Thursdays at 10 a.m. Pacific time. So it'd be great to see some familiar faces. Here's the scheduler of our webinars, and of course this webinar is going to be recorded so you can watch it later if you'd like. So with that, we've come to a close. And I just wanted to thank everybody for your attendance. And I know that inventory management, especially within the e-commerce sphere, is a very complex type of discussion. So I know this is probably a lot of information, so I do encourage you to ask any questions. You can always reach out to our customer success team. I do have, you're very welcome, Lee. I do see some folks have some other questions. I can take a few right before we close. So let me take a few of these questions. Is there a location to find past webinars? Yes. On all of our webinar page, you can definitely watch all of our past webinars, and I'll actually just bring up our help desk. And all of our help desk, all of our webinars for eCC Desktop are within our help desk. So you'll see an area called Product Webinars, and you can watch all of our past webinars here. I'll also be putting this webinar today within this area, so you can watch them at any time you have. Let's see. Oh, one last thing. Can eCC process refunds or adjustments within the order? That's a very good question. And I will say this about refunds. If eCC were able to process refunds the way it does order fulfillment, we would have to make an entirely new product. So refunding is you do have a segment of canceling the order, but truly the refund is about returning the money from the merchant account to the customer. So that is something that can be easily facilitated within the online shopping cart. eCC is able to make a credit memo against the total order or all the total items you have, but again, it's not able to return the money from your merchant bank account through the payment gateway back to your customer. So that's best handled through your online shopping cart. Great question. Thank you everyone for your time. Thank you for joining, and I hope to see you next time in our webinar series. Have a great day.